We're talking today with Thomas Haas of Rockford, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Tom, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Okay, well, I can start with that pretty easily. Grew up in Staten Island. I was born in 1951, and what happened was my dad and mom were married, of course, at the time. My dad was one of 11 children, and all but one girl. And then we had can I start over again?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, you can just
Okay.
keep going. Yeah.
I'll just start over again.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Tom Haas, and glad to be here with Jim, and appreciate the opportunity to share my story. I grew up on Staten Island. I was born in 1951. My mom and dad were of limited means, but we had a loving household. Both of my mom and dad did not graduate from high school. My father was one of 11 children in a large family, of course, almost all boys except for one girl that a mix. And my mom was the daughter of two Polish immigrants. My grandparents came from Krakow and Poland, and living through the Depression was pretty hard. So my mom made it through fourth grade. My dad didn't graduate from high school. But what happened is during World War II, my godfather was in the Navy, in the Japanese theater, and my dad decided that there was a power of an eraser, and he was able to change the birth date on his birth certificate so he can go into the service at age 16.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, the Navy and other services for that matter said if you had teeth and you had a heartbeat, that we would accept you, that we didn't look at the details. So my dad was able to join the Navy. He went to the Pacific Theater. He was on a destroyer and was a cook in the Pacific Theater, and became a petty officer in the short time he was there stationed in the Pacific. And he would always share with me, my brother, my sister, that he said, I was in the Navy, I was on a destroyer, but my real job wasn't as a cook, but it was morale officer, because I always knew that if a crew was well fed, they were going to be a happy crew,
Mm-hmm.
and we knew that we were doing our job. So that was one of the things I remember from my dad and growing up with his story of being in the service himself. He went on then to get a GED. He was really good with his hands. He was a assembler of Singer sewing machines.
Mm-hmm.
But during the war, he came back. I came into the mix after my mom and dad were married, and he couldn't make ends meet, especially with me along. So he struggled a little bit because when he was younger, he did have pneumonia, and it did impact his growth.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a really hard worker, and he probably one of the traits that I can stand tall on his shoulders because of that work ethic that he was able to share with me. So I was came along after he was able to get a GED and then join the police force, and he followed in the footsteps of my grandfather, who was also NYPD.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad first was a patrolman in the in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, in the Bowery, and in Chinatown. And he would walk the beat every week. He would change his tempo from 8 to 4, 4 to 12, 12 to 8, and did that for many years. He then moved to Brooklyn, where he was in a car now with a partner, and he was in Brooklyn, where again tough neighborhoods, especially with the longshoremen, where he was stationed. Then he finished off his career in the NYPD, and he was able to wrap that up in Staten Island. And then from there he decided it was enough. After 24 years, he wanted to drive a bus. He would take people from New York down to Atlantic City and back, and that's what he did. And my mom was able to raise me, my brother, and my sister, and she was didn't have the formal education, but she was quite intelligent and kept everything on a solid format.
All right. Now you were able to go through high school on Staten Island.
I was. We went to public school 22 and
Mm-hmm.
public and junior high school 51. Along the way, I was raised Catholic, and I wanted to consider being a priest along the way. And I thought, well, maybe what I need to do is go to the Catholic high school, Monsignor Farrell High School on Staten Island. But the problem was is we didn't have the resources for me to go. It was going to be $22 a month. We just didn't have the resources. So my dad and I struck a deal. I would work at the local big box, and I would stock shelves, and eventually, because I could actually do math, I was then promoted to the cash register positions, which was pretty neat. My dad then every third week would work a few hours still with Singer sewing machine. And so we were able to cobble together the $22 that I could go. So basically working my way through high school. And but while I was in high school, I was still considering going into the priesthood, but you know, things just progressed in a different direction. While I was there, played some sports, which I appreciated with basketball and baseball. But I really, when I was in high school, I really wanted to pursue a career in the Navy. My dad was in the Navy, my godfather was in the Navy. I thought I should be able to get into the Naval Academy. But my dad's political affiliation wasn't the same one as the senator and the House of Reps, so I was not able to get an appointment. But Father Gannon in my high school said, Tom, you can go to NRTC and maybe even the Coast Guard Academy, because the Coast Guard Academy does not need a congressional appointment. You get in there on your own merits. So I applied for Navy ROTC and got into Cornell and Villanova. And then I applied to the Coast Guard Academy, was put on a wait list. Little did I know that it was the most selective school in the nation. Still is pretty high in terms of its selectivity. So I was put on a wait list. And eventually what happened is I did decide to go to Villanova. I had a roommate and I had a room and ready to go into chemical engineering, and got a telegram. Of course, that was before we had cell phones. And decided that that was the place for me to go. So I was able to take that appointment, and about 3 or 4 days later I went up to New London, Connecticut, and started my Coast Guard career on July 4th of 1969, and now I have continued deep friendships with those individuals that I started with.
Okay, I'll back up a little bit. Just to clarify, the telegram was from the Coast Guard saying you had gotten in.
Right.
Okay.
The telegram was basically my appointment letter.
Right.
But I had 24 hours to respond.
Okay. Now, when did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 1969.
Okay.
So,
1969, I mean, you've got Vietnam going on and all of the rest. Was that anywhere in your mind at that point, or was it not really relevant for you?
it was very relevant. That was the story du jour. Every time we would turn the news on, it was all about Vietnam. But I really wanted to serve.
Mm-hmm.
I truly wanted to be walking in the same footsteps as my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he's serving in the police force, but also then serving, as we pointed out, in the Navy along with my godfather. So I knew that the possibility of winding up in Vietnam was real for Coast Guard people. In fact, the Coast Guard folks had 26 patrol boats in Vietnam. So the opportunity to serve there was pretty high because we went in with 440 people in my class. We graduated 192. So it was pretty selective to get in, and then the attrition rate was pretty high as well. So, but I knew that the possibility was always there, and I was welcoming that opportunity to serve for the United States.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the high attrition rate. What was the curriculum like at the Coast Guard Academy?
The curriculum was very technical. They did not have majors at the time. It was basically an all-in engineering program. And so when I was in high school, I decided I would really like chemistry. The reason being is because I had a seventh grade science teacher whose name was Miss Moran and Mrs. Lieberwitz, and they were able to share with me the opportunities of chemistry and working in the lab. And that's seventh grade. I wanted to be a chemist at that point in time. So I got into the Coast Guard Academy, and I had some classes that were going to be accepted for course credit. So I was able to concentrate on getting a little bit more chemistry courses while I was there, in addition to taking a couple of courses in management, organizational development while I was there too. For some reason they appealed to me, so I was able to do that as well. But my background is chemistry, and there at the Coast Guard Academy I was able to meld my likes of that science in with the engineering curriculum, and then graduate with honors. When I say that, because when I went into the Coast Guard Academy, being so late in the mix, I didn't think I was going to be successful. I truly didn't. When you do the mind thinking, saying, you know, am I going to be up to all these other folks, all these other men? And again, it was all men at that time in 1969. And so I questioned myself, but that first semester I was able to use that work ethic from my dad and able to succeed both the physical as well as the academic.
Okay. Do you have a sense of why a lot of people left? I mean, they washed out, they didn't finish. Why that happened?
Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, they didn't have the academic aptitude to succeed. But most of the time, they just didn't see the fit for them in a service life. And I think that was the majority of the people there. I still had classmates who graduated, went on to a career, who were there because their mom and dad said, you got in there, you're going to go, it's a free education. And many times that wasn't the rationale. You really had to see the fit of service. You had to see the opportunity to work hard through your time. So that was really why. Either they didn't really have the academic aptitude, but more importantly, didn't have the desire.
Okay. Now, some people have described the academy as being very rigid in terms of its structure and how you spent your time. I mean, did people have trouble? Was that happening? Were you being kind of micromanaged for what you were doing? And you all had to do things the same way?
Every hour was accounted for, especially your first year. It was called swab year, and that was a challenging time physically, mentally, emotionally, academically, to have that time management skills to succeed. So rigid, yes, definitely they had their high standards and some trivial pursuits too, I would call them, because some of the things we were doing, you wonder why we were doing that. And if you ever questioned it, they said, just do it anyway. And so we were able to, during that first year, acclimate into this more rigid lifestyle, in the service lifestyle. But what I really need to point out is I had classmates who continued to be so close to me, almost like brothers today. Now, we're going to celebrate our 50th year coming up. We graduated in '73, and we have, in fact, in May, I'm going to do the second round. In the Coast Guard, they have a golf tournament to help with those less fortunate folks in the Coast Guard, because the U.S. government does not really pay our enlisted people, especially those with families, very well. So it's called Coast Guard Mutual Assistance, and I'm going to play golf with 16 of my classmates in Myrtle Beach again. I did that last year, and one of my closest friends, his name is Steve Rollick. Steve was on the basketball team and baseball team with me, and that helped me really focus in on what I really desired, and that was to graduate. And so he and I still are great buddies. We can share stories about Steve and Tom along the way, but in part, Steve and some others were responsible for having me get the opportunity to meet my wife while I was stationed on the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac, the original Mackinac. Now there's Great Lakes Icebreaker, which took its place. But the strength of relationships, in fact, so much so, another gentleman who he and I share our birthdays pretty much. His on the 4th of March, mine on the 5th of March. His name is Dan. Dan was my roommate as well as Steve was. And my sophomore year, third class year, I came down with pneumonia, landed in the hospital for 4 days. And because you mentioned the rigidness of the curriculum and the time, the third class year is probably the toughest in terms of the needed mental strength that you had to fulfill the requirements in the engineering curriculum that was there. And so I didn't think I was going to be able to make it after being in the hospital, and I was going to leave. And Dan came to my room. He said, "Huh? What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, if you don't know what you're going to do, then you better stay." And I said, "Well, I don't know if I can make it through and do the catch-up. And when you're out for almost a week out of the program, it's really hard." He said, "We'll get through it together." So that's the strength of relationships that you can have. And now Dan and his wife Janet, Marcia, and I are best of friends, closer than brothers, and Steve and Celeste as well. Another story about Steve, which is kind of fun. We were both stationed at the Coast Guard Academy. I was teaching chemistry. He was in the equivalency of a student affairs position. And his wife Celeste was expecting the third child. We had dinner one time, and Marcia, we had also 3 children. And Marcia says, "If you need any help with anything, Tom's here to help." And Steve says, "Yep, we'll give you a call if you need it." Lo and behold, Steve was gone to Governor's Island on training. He was unable to be reached. Celeste calls me up on the morning of commencement to say, "I need you now. I can't get a hold of Steve. No one's answering the phone." There was before cell phones. And "I need you. I'm going to the hospital now. Be there." So met up with her, helped her through the process of delivering their third boy. Steve was he was made aware of this, and he got in the car to come on up. But I was there to greet their third son, and then I went back to the Coast Guard Academy after commencement to join in with my other colleagues there as we celebrated that. So I was able to celebrate commencement as well as another commencement with the birth of a new child with one of my best friends.
All right. Now let's steer back again here. You're back. We were talking about time in the Coast Guard Academy. You talked about the curriculum and the management of the lives of the cadets while you're there. Now, do you also get to do some version of field exercises or things in the summer where you actually go and do things with the Coast Guard itself?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're there 365 days and you need to be engaged in either your education or your training. So that first summer, you're primarily in the process of transforming yourself from a civilian into a service member. And during that first year, it was hard to maintain the focus, but again, with the help of classmates, and we were able to get through that. Then during the summers, in between your freshman and sophomore years, you needed to be engaged in training, and we had an opportunity of select. We could either go to Europe on a medium or high endurance cutter for the 12 weeks, or we can go to the Great Lakes and serve for 12 weeks on the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac, and basically being in an enlisted position, so learning what the roles and responsibilities are for that part of the Coast Guard. And so I decided with some of my friends, as I mentioned, Dan and Steve and others, we decided to go to the Great Lakes. And it was a magnificent decision because it was in July when the captain of the Mackinac, as well as the assistant that came to Mackinac from the Coast Guard Academy, solicited people, cadets, to be, let's see, the best way to term it is to be part of the Cherry Festival court as escorts.
Mm-hmm.
So I raised my hand because my classmates were all going to be out on liberty the night before. I was stuck on the Mackinac, so I said, well, that's a good deal. You're going to have a blind date, but someone that's in the Miss Michigan pageant, along with the Cherry Festival court, and free food. And I said, this is a pretty good deal. So I opted to do that, but the backstory is my classmates came back from Liberty saying, we have a round of golf at Traverse City Country Club, and are you in? When do you have to be there? We're going to be there at 8. I said, good, I'm there. So at 8 o'clock or before, we got to the country club. I was supposed to be back on the cutter by 11 to do my escort duties.
Mm-hmm.
And about 10-ish, we were coming up to the turn, and I said, I'm not going to be able to make it back by 11. And my classmate said, they'll have a number of people there anyway, don't worry about it. I said, well, I did make a commitment, so I better go. So I hopped in a car and got back to the Mackinac, put my uniform on, and then noon, I was on the shoreline along the docks, and there was a number of young ladies all dressed in white dresses, and we were just together, and I looked at one woman, and I took a step towards, and then my classmate, whose name was Harry, took one step forward. He was a little bit quicker than me. Her name was Marcia. Behind Marcia was Marcia. And so I introduced myself to Marcia Knapp, said, I'm Tom Haas, I'd be glad to be your escort. That was in the summer of 1970, July 6th of 1970, and I've been escorting Marcia ever since.
Very good.
And now we're coming up in 74, excuse me, we married in 74,
Mm-hmm.
and in 24 will be 50 years. And
Very good.
3 kids and 8 grandkids later.
All right. Now, when you're actually, when you're on the Mackinac at that point, you are basically functioning as an ordinary crewman.
Yes.
So did you try on the different jobs on the ship, or did they just put you in one assignment?
You were in a billet, but the rationale was for you to experience all the different job responsibilities of an enlisted person.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be on the deck crew, you could be in engineering, you could be up on the bridge wing, you could be in the mess, and everything in between. So you really did experience much of what the enlisted Coast Guard was doing. And in addition to having a mission orientation, at that point we of course weren't breaking ice, but we were there for search and rescue and also doing public affairs work. We were there during the summer where the Coast Guard Mackinac would start some of the races that were in Port Huron and in Chicago,
Right.
and the like. So we were able to experience that for over 12 weeks. And then we went back to Coast Guard Academy for my 3rd class year. Then in between the sophomore and junior years, you also need to be fully engaged, and at that point we were engaged in leadership training as future leaders within the Coast Guard Academy, and that leadership happened in your third and fourth year. But I was also able to do some sailing on the 44-foot looters, and I really enjoyed doing that as well. So that was a transitionary year into more of a leadership role, learning about who you are, and I was able to do that. The other part of this story in terms of training was in your freshman year, you were able to go on board the Coast Guard cutter Bark Eagle, which is a 310-foot long. It came from Germany. It was called a horse vessel. It was created by Hitler for his navy for training officers in the Nazi Navy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to spend my first time at sea on the Eagle, and we were going to go to, they broke us up into three groups. There were going to be 3-week-long cruises. We were in the last one. We were going to go to Bermuda, but a Hurricane Blanche came up, got in our way, and I spent what I thought was my last day on this earth. And it wasn't Earth, it was in the North Atlantic,
Mm-hmm.
because the Blanche came and really ripped us up. Blanche took a turn into us, and we had some standing rigging, and we decided that I was on what's called a ready boat crew at the middle of the night, hearing snaps and winds and waves and everything else, and we were lashed to each other and to the rigging itself, hopeful that the rigging wasn't going to break, which some of it did. And so we got up the next morning, and the hurricane left us, and we wound up going to Newport, Rhode Island, and that's where we spent. But it was a memory of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
On the Coast Guard cutter Eagle. In my junior year, I also spent 6 weeks on the Eagle again, more in terms of being a junior officer
Mm-hmm.
at that point. So those are the memories that really stay with you as well. Then in between my junior and senior year, it then went back to, you were going to take 12 weeks, either go to Europe or on the Mackinac.
Mm-hmm.
We already did Mackinac, so I decided to go on the Coast Guard cutter Dwayne, and had some high goals of being all set to go with my requirements as a junior officer for being officer to deck. And during the time there, we were able to go to the North Atlantic. We went to England, and then to we went up to Oslo, and then Bergen, and so we were able to go through some of the ports in Northern Europe and then back. But one of the fun parts was we were on the Dwayne the first day of summer in the international date line at the Arctic Circle, and so that was a fun memory, because if you go over some of the geological descriptions, whether it be Arctic Circle, Equator, Antarctic, Dateline, you have some traditions. You had to meet King Neptune,
Mm-hmm.
who usually was the chief, an overweight chief, who was all blue, because we were going into the Arctic with that. So it was kind of fun
Mm-hmm.
to do that, those memories. But I was able to achieve the goal of being a deck watch officer, which helped me then once I graduated from my first unit.
Okay. Just for clarity purposes, I thought the international date line runs down the Pacific.
Oh, no,
Were you on the Prime Meridian?
The Prime Meridian.
When it goes through Greenwich, England,
That's
or
what
south?
it was, yeah.
Okay, very good.
Thank
All right.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, we did revisit the Prime Meridian when I was over in Europe later on, when I was at Grand Valley State. I was giving an honorary degree with one of the universities that we had, and we decided we had to go to the Meridian.
All right. So now, When do you actually graduate from the Coast Guard Academy?
I graduated in 1973, and went on board the Coast Guard cutter Acacia out of Port Huron, Michigan. You selected your first billet by virtue of where you stood in the class at that point. And at that point, I had pretty good ranks. I was 25th in the class, academically and militarily. And so I had a whole sheet of opportunities. And so I said to myself, a buoy tender, which was good duty, in Hawaii sounded pretty good. So I called up Marcia because you had to do what's called a mock billet night first. And you were able to select what that first unit would be. So I called Marcia and said, we're going to go to Hawaii. She says, I don't think so. We're going to get married in '74. You want me to do all this planning for the wedding? And I don't think so. That wouldn't be very nice. And I said, okay, gotcha. So with that, the next person in line after me was Mason Stober. He went to Hawaii. He thinks the world of Marcia. And so I was able to select the buoy tender, which is what I really wanted. So it was out of Port Huron, Michigan, which was a great tour of duty. I had great responsibilities. The commanding officers that I work with, my other colleagues, went from being a junior officer to being operations officer, and then a short while being acting XO, executive officer. I really appreciated the Great Lakes after that tour of duty, and then from there went to the University of Michigan for graduate school.
Okay, so describe the Acacia. How long is it? How large is the crew?
Yep, the Acacia was built before World War II, and Coast Guard has a really good way to continue the service of some of these assets. And so World War II to being fully operational yet in 1993. I say that because many years later, my son, who went to the Coast Guard Academy during his summer training program, was on the Mackinac as well, on the Acacia as well. And his commanding officer at the time is also a good friend of mine, who's now the 4-star for the Coast Guard. So my son, Gregory, and the current Commandant of Coast Guard was the CO at the time, but still on the Acacia. The Acacia is 180 feet, buoy tender. Buoy tender means involves with aids to navigation in the Great Lakes. We were very active in from Port Huron. Our AOR, our area of responsibility, went from Detroit all the way up to the mitten to Alpena for the aids work, which included the Saginaw Bay and the Saginaw River. So we would do all the aids to navigation, making sure that they were all maintained. And in the late fall, we'd have to pull the lighted aids because of the ice possibilities with lighted aids doesn't mix. So we'd have to replace those, and then in the spring we'd go throw them back in the water. And so we did that. We also had reinforced bow for ice breaking operations. And we broke ice in 4 of the 5 Great Lakes, including Lake Superior. I probably lost some of my hearing because of sleeping with my head next to the skin of the ship during icebreak operations with very high frequency sound coming through. And I know meticulously that's the case. So the crew was about 42 strong. We had a commanding officer, XO operations, and then 2 other officers, including then a 3rd officer, 1 officer who was the engineering officer, and then the crew, including chiefs and the other enlisted, to do all the work on the deck to service the buoys, and then do all the work that was necessary during ice-breaking operations. If you can imagine, during ice-breaking operations, ice would cover the cutter, and you'd have to go out there with wooden bats and break the ice down so we wouldn't become top-heavy. And a couple of times we were engaged with ice breaking in the rivers so that the ice jams would not create a dam which causes flooding, so we're able to do that. But one funny story is Christmas Eve, one of my shipmates was officer deck. We were coming, we really wanted to get home for Christmas, and we're on St. Mary's River. It was not St. Mary's River. One of the rivers down south of Detroit, I forget what it is. But nonetheless, we were able to get going after some work with ice breaking, and he decided to take a left turn when it should have been a right turn, and we went aground. But it was in soft muck, and so we had a big rock. It was a rock, it was 15 tons of rock that we could waggle back and forth. But it was funny, one of the 1,000-foot Lakers came alongside of us and said, "Acacia, you need help?" "No, we're all set, we're just exploring." We finally got loose, but got ourselves home. But we were able to use the assets that we had there to overcome an embarrassing situation. Having a Coast Guard cutter run aground would ruin your day, but there was no problems with the cutter itself because we really were able to get into some muck and sand, not into, at times because of the glacial outflow, the rock can be also devastating to any cutters going in and out of that area.
Okay. Now, just again to back up a little, why were you interested in being on a buoy tender rather than something else?
I liked the mission. I really did. I thought the mission of providing aids to the maritime industry was a critical component. I thought about joining the Coast Guard Air Wing and being a pilot for helicopters, but when I took the aptitude test, it didn't show that I had the capacity really to do that. So that was fine, but I didn't really want to be in the Atlantic or the Pacific for long stretches of time either. And so that came through loud and clear, especially with being newly married. I didn't want to be away on Coast Guard icebreakers where you're away for 6 months, or on some of the other high endurance cutters on the coastlines or down in the Gulf region.
Right.
So I decided, primarily a mission. I really thought that mission I could really appreciate.
Okay. So how long did you stay with the Acacia?
2 years.
Okay.
Halfway through that time on the Acacia, the gentleman from Coast Guard headquarters, his name was Fred Hallerson, commander, he was in a hazmat program, and he comes up to the Acacia, said, "I understand you like chemistry, that you did the work in Coast Guard Academy of Chemical Engineering, but you like chemistry." And he said, "I need some chemists on my staff at Coast Guard headquarters." And I started thinking about that, and he said also needed someone that might have some desire to learn about the injurious effects of chemicals in the environment and also in maritime worker safety. So I said, okay. He said, "And I can send you to either Maryland, Wisconsin, or Michigan for your grad program. It's earlier than normal, because normally you'd have to have at least 2 tours of duty before you go to grad school.
Right.
But I already looked up your record, and I need you to get the educational experiences that are necessary to come into the hazmat program so that you can evaluate cargoes for the safe shipment, but also look at the health and safety of the crews and making sure that we have the right evaluations of the cargoes themselves as they get shipped in and out of U.S. ports." So with that I said, that's pretty good. I think we might have to consider that. In Michigan, I can stay right here. Marsh is from Michigan. This is pretty neat. So I was able to finish off my tour, and this was actually just before the Edmunds Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened in '74, but I was in '75,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was able to go to the University of Michigan, and I was there for a 2-year period called DUINS, Duty Under Instruction,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to get a master's degree in chemistry. But as I was going through, two things happened. One was some pressure by other Coast Guard officers at the University of Michigan who were getting degrees in naval architecture and marine engineering. I was the only one, and there was one other person doing a chemical engineering
Mm-hmm.
program. I was involved in doing chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
and they really wanted someone with that expertise on the staff. So I said, well, maybe I'll take a couple of classes in the environmental protection. It turned out to be in a program out of the School of Public Health that I was able to take a class or two. Fred says, well, this is great. Take some coursework in toxicology. I said, okay, good. So I did. And I was able to, in the 2 years I was there, I was able to use my summer programs. I was able to double count 2 classes for 2 degrees. One for the environmental health sciences degree out of the School of Public Health as well as chemistry. So I was able to get 1 degree in 76 and one in 77, and basically commingling that. I worked pretty hard,
Mm-hmm.
but it was worth all the efforts. And going to University of Michigan was a joy for Marcia and me as well, with all the festivities, especially around football season.
Mm-hmm.
But we worked hard. Again, standing tall, my dad's work ethic was able to achieve those 2 outcomes from going to the University of Michigan, and then go to Coast Guard headquarters.
Okay. Now, so is that New London, Connecticut, or where? So where is the Coast Guard headquarters?
Oh, the Coast Guard headquarters is in Washington, D.C.
Oh, that's in D.C., right? The academy is
in New London,
yeah,
Connecticut.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So
now
I was able to join Fred for a short while, and then his next in line was a fellow named John Lindback. And so I was able to work on the technical side of the safe transportation of hazmats, both in the packaged goods arena as well as bulk cargo. And we were able to evaluate the cargoes with a certain set of attention to what the safety hazards would be. Along the way, I was asked to go to Geneva, Switzerland, to join what's called the Group of Rapporteurs Committee of Experts to establish a protocol for the shipment of hazardous materials across the globe. And these were in packaged hazardous materials. And so we were able to work through some of the Cold War scenarios, especially with Russia and
Mm-hmm.
China. And I learned a lot about how important the global perspective is from that experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so we remember one story where we were invited by the Russians for a dinner gathering at where they were living. The KGB was all around.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell, and the experts in chemistry and transportation were all together there, and we were able to create the protocols. And I think they're still in place today.
Are like what to do in case of accidents, or for what protocols for what exactly?
Wanted to make sure that the safety gear was on board, the training for the maritime workers was there, the safety focus was also there,
Mm-hmm.
but primarily what was going to be necessary for understanding that certain cargoes don't get along very well with one another,
Mm-hmm.
and you would have the potential of accidents, especially if they were in the same cargo hold.
Mm-hmm.
And so you wanted to make sure that these protocols were followed and the cargoes were placed where they could have least impact if there was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
The other part too was for bulk cargoes. We wanted to make sure that some of the cargoes for bulk shipment were also evaluated, whether it be oils, which was really somewhat innocuous in terms of its toxicological standpoint, but very nasty in the environment. So you had to understand what types of carriage requirements were necessary there. So we were able to create all that in a matter of some months.
All right. Okay. And then how long was your stint in Washington then?
4 years.
Okay. And were there other particular things that went on during that time that were significant for you?
Yeah, it was an opportunity for me to grow in my leadership. I was brought in there relatively young because I normally, again, it was 2 or 3 billets out from your first billet to go to grad school. So I go there, I was a Lieutenant JG at the time, and was placed in a leadership role overseeing some both military but more civilian experts in chemistry and in transportation of package and bulk cargoes. Then John needed to go, John Lindak went to another billet, and I was the only person left standing, so to speak, and they asked me to be the branch chief.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a 05 billet for an 02/4, excuse me, 3, and so I was able to learn some of the leadership skills needed in that space of hazmat transportation. And so that was one of those opportunities, just happens because of the circumstances, and you're there and you take on those leadership roles. So I learned a lot about who I was as a leader, and working with others that were a little bit more senior to me, but were able to work together for mission.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then 89, 81, that, let's see, the year, the time frame when you were there was what date to what date?
Let's see, so I left Michigan in 77.
77, 81?
To 81.
Okay.
And during that time, I was doing a couple of other things. Number one, I was asked to come back to the Coast Guard Academy as a guest instructor in the chemistry program. I said sure, so I did that a few times for my academic advisor, whose name was Tony Weeman. And it was a remarkable opportunity to go back to my alma mater and teach a little chemistry. I always thought I wanted to teach, even when I was in junior high school. But I thought that was a good opportunity for me to go back to the Coast Guard Academy and teach in the academic arena where I came from. But I also was able to teach in the Masters Mates and Pilot School in Lithicum Heights, Maryland. This is a union school. They wanted someone that could share with them the hazards of confined space entry. So I was able to do that, and I was also able to teach in Yorktown, Virginia, during the same type of training in hazmats and in confined space entry and the like. And so while I was at Michigan, I was also close to getting a certification in industrial hygiene. And I got all the coursework in, but I didn't have the number of years of service. And so, but I was able to use that down in Yorktown, Virginia. So in 1980, I had a really good mentor with John Lindak before I took over his position. And I said, now what do I need to do? Because I need to leave in 81. He said, well, let me do it this way. I know you really love going to Yorktown, and it's great because you're really making a big impact with both officers and enlisted, especially in this realm of hazmat transportation. And he said, however, I know that you could go back to the Coast Guard Academy and teach there. So he says, what would look better on your resume? An instructor at the training center or as a assistant professor at the Coast Guard Academy. And maybe you can do some coaching there too. So I took that advice and decided that I would pursue that career path, that I would go to the Coast Guard Academy. I would teach chemistry and coach men's baseball, because at the Coast Guard Academy, as I mentioned, it was basketball and baseball, and a really good coach, his name was Captain D. Combs. Captain Combs said, oh, you're coming to the academy, I'll see you in the spring. Make sure you dress warmly, because I'd love to have you help out with the baseball program with my head coach too, whose name was Don Penny. And so I said, sure, so I could do that, and I got back to something I really loved doing, teaching chemistry, and then coaching, and the family along the way.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so how long was that stint at the Coast Guard Academy?
Quite a while.
Okay.
What happened is different steps along the way. Came there, nominally it's called rotating military staff, or military faculty, and it's a 4-year billet. And so I went there with the notion of 4 years that I would return, go back to the opportunity within the Coast Guard, maybe go back on a Coast Guard cutter, or going back to headquarters, or going back into some billet with merchant marine safety, which I thought I really appreciated the environmental mission of the Coast Guard. And so they had some opportunities. So I started my first year with the advice of some of my colleagues to get a MBA, because that's what you can do. You can get a MBA through Rensselaer Polytechnic. They had a site, their home is in Rensselaer, New York, but they had some campus sites in Groton, Connecticut. So it said, well, that's pretty good, and a number of others along the way. So I started my MBA program, got all the prerequisites out of the way, and then a position that was called, I was doing chemistry. I was also teaching leadership during the summer as well, and doing some work during the summers with cadet training. And so we heard about this permanent commission teaching staff position, which combined the military as well as the academic. And so I applied to do that, and it's very rigorous and very selective, and I was given the opportunity to do that. So I had to stop my pursuit of my MBA. I had 2 more classes to do. I could get a master's degree in human resources management, and then I needed to start my PhD study, which I looked at Michigan, and I had really good mentors here, but also had the opportunity going to University of Connecticut, and I had a fellow whose name was Uli Müller-Westerhoff, a German chemist who came out of industry, out of IBM, to be the section leader in chemistry at the University of Connecticut, who my mentor and academic advisor of Coast Guard Academy knew him. So he says, you might really enjoy working with Uli. And so I decided to, halfway through my time in this 4-year billet, halfway through you had a chance to say, okay, I want to pursue this for the rest of my career as an academic military person at the Coast Guard Academy, or not, and finish up. So I decided at that point I would pursue this pathway for me, and it was an excellent opportunity for me to continue on with the enjoyment I had in the classroom, as well as my time in the coaching realm as well. So I did that, and eventually then finished off my PhD, did a little bit of postdoc work at Yale, in my time frame there. And then I moved from being a lieutenant commander, then a commander. In order to be a commander, you had to have the PhD, so they linked your military rank along with the academic credentials that you needed. And then I had to pursue leadership roles as well as further work to get tenure. So at the point I was a commander, I also received tenure at the same time, and then went on to be a captain when I eventually retired. And along the way, I was able to pursue some desire for academic leadership. I started off with being a chemistry section chief, but then wound up really wanting to join the American Council on Education Fellows Program, and I was able to pursue that at Western Michigan. So I did that for a year, and so through that time frame, from in the late 80s, I received my PhD in '87, went into the dean's office at the Coast Guard Academy, and the dean at the time asked me to be in charge of bucks and bodies, basically faculty and the budget. And so I did that, and then did this fellowship, came back and got into the associate dean's work, and that was pretty remarkable because I was able to do the work there in terms of curriculum and strategic planning in the academic world. I really have relied on that experience throughout the rest of my career. So the AC fellowship and then the work at the Coast Guard, still teaching. I was still full-time teaching and doing leadership and coaching, because my coaching took me from coaching baseball into coaching women's basketball for a year to being a head coach of the women's softball program at the Coast Guard Academy for another 7 or 8 years.
All right. Now, had the Coast Guard Academy desegregated, open to women between the time when you were a student and when you came back, or were they only starting to bring in women when you got there?
No, the women came, and the Commandant of the Coast Guard said we need to expand our leadership horizon. So in '76, the Commandant of the Coast Guard said we need to start looking at this, and the first class of that had women came in, and the first class graduated in '80. So the '76 to '80 first class, and '81 was that was when I arrived there, and you could already see the transition. So it was about 78% of the entire Corps cadets, a very small number of women, excellent leaders too. Some of my contemporaries weren't too happy with the fact that women were going to be there. I embraced that notion because leadership can be exhibited by those that are best able to, and includes both men and women. And so I was able then to, when I moved out of men's sports into women's sports, I was able to really understand how important that was for the Coast Guard and its success going forward.
All right. Now, did you have, when you were back on the Acacia, was that an all-male crew at that
Yes.
time? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it was.
All right. Okay. Now, so we've got you here. You are kind of learning more bits and pieces of administration and so forth. And then, so when do you actually leave the Coast Guard Academy?
I decided to retire. My first retirement in '96.
Okay.
I was a captain. I achieved some of the goals I wanted, and I said I could now use the AC experiences and all that, and I was attracted to a position at William Penn College. It became the William Penn University. Its president was a remarkable fellow. His name was John Fallon, and I appreciated much what he was able to offer me. So I decided that was a place I could go and explore a little bit about who I am in terms of administrative roles. And it was a private school, struggling for resources, struggling with enrollment, but that's true in most of the cases in higher education.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't changed from '96 to now.
And where is it located?
That's in Iowa,
Okay.
Oskaloosa, Iowa. Little did I know at the time that my wife's grandmother was at that school
Mm-hmm.
as well, and that the first president was a long distance cousin of my wife. His name was Halsey Knapp. My office was in Knapp Hall.
All right.
And so I was able to go from my experience in '96, 2 years in Oskaloosa, and I'll come back. I misspoke. The opportunity in Knapp Hall was when I was president at State University of New York. So
Okay,
we'll
okay.
correct that.
Right. All right.
I know.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what we did is for 2 years was able to work, and then
So what was your actual job in Oskaloosa?
at William Penn,
Yeah.
provost.
Okay, you're provost.
Right, and so it wasn't called the provost, but it was vice president for academic and student affairs. So
Right.
both of those
Right.
parts of the title.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a relatively short period of time, only 2 years. The reason being because my dean colleague, Bill Sanders, decided to retire, and that job became open. And I had a number of my classmates saying, "You need to apply to be the chief academic officer at our alma mater. You got the background, you got the experience,
Mm-hmm.
you got the desire and hope." And so I did, and was able to achieve that part of my professional goals of being the chief academic officer at the Coast Guard Academy. Had really 2 great bosses during my time there. That was a 5-year appointment.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to go through reaccreditation work, more leadership opportunities that I could grow from, and but about 3 years into that job, I started getting overtures from the State University of New York saying, "We would love to have you come and be a president.
Mm-hmm.
We heard about you," and I said, "Well, I can't do it." So I said no, basically 3 years running.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hit the 5th year, I said, "Well, talk to Marshall."
Okay, so we had taken the story to the point when you're finishing your stint as essentially provost, or was he fit at the Coast Guard Academy or whatever?
Right.
Okay, and what year was that?
Let's see, that was
Like 03?
'03.
All right.
Yeah. And then from there went to, so this is probably a little bit redundant, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Iowa, where I was asked to be the VP of Academic Student Affairs at William Penn.
No, I think we had done that. We've
We've
done
done-
William Penn. So
Okay,
you
done.
had your stint at William Penn, then you went back to the Coast Guard Academy
Right, as the dean.
as a
Right. And chief academic officer.
Right.
They're now at the Coast Guard Academy. Dean is now provost.
Right,
They
okay.
just made that determination. But I decided after getting some overtures to go to the State University of New York system.
Mm-hmm.
At first, it was to be the president at the Maritime College.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it wasn't the right time. I committed my 5 years.
Right.
And I could have had another 5 years without competition. My boss was pleased with what we were able to achieve together for the cadets and
Mm-hmm.
for the Coast Guard in terms of the academic programming
Mm-hmm.
and the relevance there was to the Coast Guard itself. But after getting these overtures with SUNY, we decided to take a step and go to upstate New York to a small town called Cobleskill. And there, I was saying before, I was in the office named after Marcia's cousin,
Mm-hmm.
whose name was Halsey Knapp. Marcia's maiden name was Knapp,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the first president. I was the 10th at this small rural campus. It was a very interesting set of curriculum. It had its own farm, including 200 plus cows that was milking every day. and crops. It was 700 acres of land. It was a campus of about 1,000 students. It was a beautiful location in Schoharie County. It was a very, very poor region too. It was in the northernmost county in the Appalachia region.
Mm-hmm.
And the Appalachia region really had a wide swath in the United States. But it was a great community, great job. I enjoyed my colleagues there immensely, and really felt a good home
Mm-hmm.
while I was in my first presidency there too, and able to accomplish lots in a relatively short period of time. And it was a public institution, part of the SUNY system. It did start off not in the SUNY system, but then it was brought in the 40s or 50s
Mm-hmm.
to be part of the SUNY system. And so it was a great place, but nonetheless a relatively short period of time, however, again. And I was being asked and recruited to come to Grand Valley.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, at Coble School, did they have a particular focus? Was it kind of an ag and tech school, or?
It was interesting. It was what I would call an all-purpose. They had 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees.
Mm-hmm.
It was an ag tech college, so we had agricultural programs as well as the liberal arts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I really appreciated the mission. We had question programs. I remember building a equestrian performance arena and things like that for students. We had students coming up from Long Island who were into horses, and they would bring their horses up and needed a place to board them.
Okay.
So we were able to do that. We had an aquaponics program that I appreciated much the research that we were doing there as well. We had a good intercollegiate program. So it was really what I call an all-purpose campus, 2 years and 4 years, technical and traditional liberal arts.
Okay. Now, are you being recruited by other places sort of out of the blue, or are you connected with any search firms yourself, or?
I was there at SUNY Cobleskill, thinking I'd be there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't my last stop, I knew that, but that we would enjoy the opportunity that we had while we were there.
Okay.
When Mark Murray decided to step down in '05, my brother-in-law, who lives here in the greater Grand Rapids area, sends me a post out of the Grand Rapids Press above the lines of President Murray stepping down to go to Myers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wrote to me in a snail mail saying, take a look at that. Mark's leaving, maybe this is a place for you. And I just discounted it, actually. I said, we're doing well. Marcia's enjoying her time here in New York. She was actually an elected official to the library board. So we were establishing ourselves there in Cobleskill. And the faculty I got to work with was wonderful. I had a provost myself who I hired. Her name was Ann Myers, who's a phenomenal academic leader, and the other deans I had in the space too, and a good connection within the community.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened then, I discounted that in the January timeframe of '06, and I get a call though in April saying, from a consulting firm, saying you have been nominated, I don't know who it was, still don't, for the presidency of Grand Valley State. I said, okay, really? And I said, well, I don't know, but he said, I really want to meet you. Can we meet together sometime in Boston on these dates? So he gave me 3 dates, and each time I said, I'm a sitting president. I'm not about to go public that I'm being pursued for another presidency. He said, well, so number 1, 2, and 3, they just didn't work. And I said, well, then he said, well, I said, I'm going to be in Boston. I'm going to pick up my daughter. She's going to be you. and my wife, and I can do it on this Sunday, towards the end of April. He said, well, I'm going to be heading towards San Francisco. And I said, okay, and that's fine. I don't want to pursue something that I can't or you can't. He said, no, I'm going to change my schedule. I'm just intrigued. I want to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
So we did. We met in Boston for a couple of hours. My wife was still kind of upset because I was nominally for a 1 hour meeting. It turned out to be 3, and she had to move our daughter out of her home, out of her apartment. And so, then I got a call back Monday, said, we're still interested. Can you send me your full resume and maybe a letter of interest? And so Marcia and I spoke, and I said, well, I can do that. A couple weeks later, got a call, said, we'd like to invite you for some airport interviews in Chicago on this date. And at that point I was free, I could do that. So I went over to Chicago, met up with the Presidential Search Committee, and what they did is they took the committee, broke it in 2 pieces. You're going to meet with one half, and then the other half. The first half I didn't think I did particularly well with the Q&A. The second one I felt fine, and I told Marcia, I said, well, that was interesting. I learned a little bit more about myself through the process, and I'm glad we have a good job in New York too, that we're enjoying. And then about a couple of days later, I got another call from the search committee saying, we'd like you to visit campus. And I said, okay, so came and visit campus. And then the final was, you're the last person standing, want you to meet with the Board of Trustees. And so from April till, I think it was the end of June, it was a really quick turnaround. And I needed to, at some point along the way, tell my board in New York that I was being considered, which I did. My provost still is one of my best friends, and she says, I'm still upset that you left. And I said, well, and you know, and then with a big smile, she said, I know, you had to do that, and I'm going to wish you very, very well as my board out there. But Grand Valley was really good about due diligence, and they sent a number of people, board members as well as members of the search committee, to Cobleskill to check out that I was as presented. And so that turned out to be pretty well. And then back in '06, I was introduced as the new president of the board meeting.
All right. Which on the whole seems to have worked out pretty well. How long did you spend at Grand Valley?
Still there now, but in the presidency 13 years. Yeah. And during that time I wouldn't give up a day. It was a remarkable opportunity for me to continue to grow professionally, to serve a university that I continue to hold close in my heart. It's a remarkable place, whether it be the students, the faculty, the staff, my colleagues, the Board of Trustees that I got to work with through those years, because they, as a public institution in Michigan, they turn over every 2 years. I was able to work with 6 or 7 different board members over that period of time, working with the foundation, working with alumni, working with members in this community in a greater sense of West Michigan and into the state of Michigan as well. One of my highlights was later on in my time at Grand Valley when the governor's office, that was Governor Snyder, asked me to chair a commission to help with the framework for education in the state of Michigan that could take us from 17 for the next 10 years. And I still think it's relevant today, even probably more so post-COVID. So I've had a chance to continue to serve, and while here, lots of great opportunities. I've been able to be recognized with 2 honorary doctorate degrees as well, but primarily through service. I mentioned my grandparents came from Poland. The University of Krakow was the university that gave me an honorary degree 100 years after they departed. They departed in 15. I went back to Krakow and received an honorary degree in 2015. So those are the types of things that happens in our lives and professional lives that I'm so pleased with. And then Grand Valley, the whole opportunity to continue to serve this region with our students and continue the growth of the university, both in terms of bricks and sticks, but also impact as well. And we couldn't have asked for a better place for me to wind up with my final place administratively.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm still back in the classroom. I'm teaching right from this office in a Zoom format, and but not in chemistry. The provost said I can find chemistry profs, but I can't find retired presidents who have the experiences you have with your leadership roles and opportunities you've had to share those maybe with the Ed Specialist program and maybe in the undergrad program as well. So I'm teaching now, and I'm going to have a student come on Zoom tonight. She was a little bit late with with her program because of some family issues, so we'll set her up and for success. So, but I do think coming here and go on with highlights, probably 2 highlights were going through 2 rounds of reaccreditation, and then 2 highlights were 2 of the comprehensive campaigns that we ran. One during the Grand Recession. We were bold when I came here and said we're going to take a new model and not go project by project, but comprehensive. So let's go for 50 years, $50 million for 50 years of service, and that would be 2010. And the board says that's pretty bold. I said, well, I think we can do it. And I got Rich DeVos, who's the chair of our foundation, and others say, well, let's do it then. And we did, and during the Grand Recession, we brought in $98 million. And that, to me, demonstrated the health of Grand Valley in terms of its relevance here in West Michigan. And then we pressed ahead. Right before I left, we pursued another comprehensive campaign, $85 million, and we decided to move that to President Mantella, and we had achieved the 85. We said, let's go for 100, and then under her leadership, they were able to achieve the 100 plus as well. So those are 2 goals in the development piece, as well as the academic piece with the reaccreditation.
And it certainly translated into a lot of new building and so forth, in the downtown campus and even in Allendale and so forth. You can see the physical results of that.
Yeah, the investments we made in the health professions was something very strategic. I really enjoyed my strategic thinking with my colleagues around the table, with the board as well, and those in the community. And we were able to, I think we went from about 2 million square feet to 5 million square feet during my time here with the buildings.
Yeah.
But the buildings weren't built for just the building's sake, but for the programmatic needs for the university. So in the College of Business, we needed that space. We needed the space in Allendale for sciences. We needed the space especially up on Medical Mile. And there we're able to take what Don and Mark built with Cook DeVos, and I was able to get some additional properties. I had some really great staff. Tom Butcher, my chief, how would you call him? He was a chief lawyer, but also he was a great guy with the opportunity to couple together real estate that we needed up there as well. So we were able to do that, and we had the Finkelstein Hall, and then most recently the Dan and Pam Interprofessional Health, the Voss Center,
right
there as well. So we were able to do that and also continue the growth. Another highlight really is some of the efforts we've had in intercollegiate sports. We're by far the nation's exemplar when it comes to NCAA Division II sports, especially with the achievement of our student athletes in that space, whether it be from football to women's soccer, to cross country to other sports. So,
yeah. All right. Now I've got a different question for you, kind of off of that track. You did a lot of work in your Coast Guard career, dealing with things like hazardous materials and all of this kind of stuff. Um, do you or any of the people you work with or programs you develop have any connection to what happened at the time of the Exxon Valdez spill?
Yeah, that was I was at the Coast Guard Academy, and I got a call. Folks knew my background with hazmat and teaching at the Coast Guard Academy. My boss, the superintendent, got a call from his boss, the commandant, saying, "We need Tom to come up to Alaska." This was just a few days after the Valdez incident happened.
Reminder, just what year was that?
I think it was '89.
Okay.
Yeah, and so my boss says, "You need to go up there, pack your bags, you're going now." I said, "Yes, sir." So I went and worked with the unseen coordinator. His name was Clyde Lusk, Admiral Lusk. Really great leader in terms of what the leadership skills necessary to respond to this horrific circumstance in the state of Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to do that. We were able to be creative. He brought me up there to be the data manager, to take in all the accounts of how we were doing, as well as the cleanup, responding to the needs of the public in the state of Alaska and to the nation as well, because it really was a national story.
Mm-hmm.
So, funny side story on that, the Coast Guard was involved with doing its own technologies, and it was getting in the way of what the Admiral needed. So I said, "Admiral, we're going to go this route. We needed to get some user-friendly data sets that you could then use in the reports time in, time out." So we did. We got new technology with mapping capability. I was able to create a day-by-day log, which then was important from the legal standpoint. So we had to make sure we had that covered. And so we were able to respond. Clyde Lusk left, Admiral Ciancaglini came in. It was fascinating because Exxon really was pressuring us to identify what clean was. How do you know what clean is in cleaning an oil spill? We had no idea. So we had to invent certain terminologies to say what clean was. So we did. We instituted an acronym called the Clyde for Clyde Lusk, and that was how we would kind of monitor the cleanup operation. But along the way, my chemistry research and hazmat research came into play. We were able to identify certain cleaning operations by using the indigenous bacteria, by sprinkling some fertilizer, and the bacteria would go munching on the oil and create just carbon dioxide and water, which was kind of neat. Because when Admiral Ciancaglini was there, he was being pressured by Exxon saying, "I have the best thing since sliced bread, Admiral. Just look at this beach, it's clean.
Mm-hmm.
We just sprayed this with this detergent substance and it's clean." And so I went and investigated.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out on the shoreline and picked up a clean topical rock and turned it over, and there was the oil, really kind of gooey, tar-like substance. It was clean on the top. What had happened is Exxon was not bad-mouthing them, but this was what had happened. They were just spraying some kerosene on top and causing the oil to then go into the deeper substructure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told the Admiral, I said, "Please don't sign off on this, otherwise your name will go down in infamy in terms of the environmentalists here in the state of Alaska." And he said, "I hear you, Tom, so we're not going to do that." There was other ways that we were able to proceed with cleanup, and then they went back the following year. But that was a remarkable time, working basically 18-hour days for about a 12-week, if not more, period of time during that summer.
All right. Yeah, I had heard you had something to do with that, so good thing I asked, I guess. All right. Now, Again, to look back over that career, particularly the period in the Coast Guard, are there other particular aspects of your story or things that stand out for you that you haven't brought into the story yet?
Well, I think we really concentrated a lot on the Coast Guard experiences,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be operational, whether it be in Geneva, Switzerland, the Coast Guard headquarters, working in Yorktown, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
But the part of the story probably needs to be more personal as well,
Mm-hmm.
because my children are all or have been in the services too. I'll start off though with the middle child,
Mm-hmm.
who recently retired to Alaska, where he had served 3 times in Alaska. He's now creating his home for his family. He has 2 wonderful girls, a beautiful wife, living in Seward. He has created a home for himself, but also a business as well as teaching. So he's teaching now because part of his career was to teach in Petaluma as a training officer for Coast Guard enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
And he enjoyed doing that, but he really had a great career. First off on a cutter in North Carolina, and then he moved to Alaska, where he was wound up being XO on a buoy tender, same type of unit I was on, only in Homer. And then he also had time as a Admiral's aide, one of my contemporaries in the Pacific, the Atlantic area,
Mm-hmm.
commander. And then he was able to go to Kodiak Island, where he was an executive officer there. But he also had a chance along the way, because of technology, achieve a master's degree in performance technology out of Boise State. So that's why he's now teaching
Mm-hmm.
at the community college, which is an AvTech in Seward.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2-year technical program. He's a senior instructor now, but in his really fun part of his life now, he and his family are being entrepreneurs and creating a brewery with glacial brewed water in Seward. And one of my colleagues here in the College of Ed, where I call home now academically, with moving away from chemistry into the academic world of teaching now post the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really enjoying the opportunity of teaching in the Ed Specialist program as well as the undergrad program, as mentioned before. But Gregory had a great career in the Coast Guard, said that he really wanted to live in Alaska, and so we got to see what he's building there with his family in Seward. Our oldest son, so there's a Coast Guard connection with him. My oldest son is a retired Lieutenant Colonel, F-15 instructor pilot. He did spend time in the Northern Watch operation back many years ago in the Middle East, and now he's flying for FedEx, and he's enjoying his family there in Memphis. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter decided that she didn't want to go to the academy as the other 2 children did, but she did get into the Naval Academy and some ROTC programs, and she wanted to live in Boston, so she went to Boston University, did the Navy ROTC program, and while she was there, she needed to visit with the 4-star, the Admiral Rickover, a few times removed, mm-hmm. 4-star, and she was able to take her ROTC experiences in manufacturing engineering. She started mechanical manufacturing engineering and move into the nuclear Navy. Her claim to fame is something I'm very proud of, because as you know, we are not that far from here to the Ford Museum. Got to know the Ford family along the way, and Sarah got to meet them too. Mm-hmm. And what Sarah did is she was appointed to be a designer for the valves on the 2 nuclear propulsion plants on the Ford aircraft carrier. Mm-hmm. And they are now, so she saw from design to testing to implementation over the 5 years she was active duty. And so she was able to go on board during the festivities in the christening
Mm-hmm.
the Ford aircraft carrier. So that was kind of fun. So she and her husband, who was also in the nuclear navy, he was on the other side of the nuclear navy. He was entrusted to ensure that the breakdown of the nuclear assets on those particular vessels were done safely.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah was on the other side of that. But they live in New York now. Sarah's raising two magnificent little boys, and John moved away from the Navy to come to Chicago. He got a degree in management MBA, actually from Booth. Went into McKinsey, worked there for a few years. Now as a chief operating officer for supply chain industry and beverage industry in New York. So that's what they're doing. So that's the family with the background of the services. And the final part of the story, we mentioned my dad along the way. My wife's dad is a hero, as my dad is too. I got to meet Seaman A. Knapp. The name, not name dropping, but the Seaman A. Knapp name goes back many, many generations, so much so that there's a arch in Washington, D.C. named after Marsh's great-great-grandfather, who was entrusted in the Department of Agriculture in creating the opportunities for the land-grant colleges. And so that was he. So there's a Seaman A. Knapp there, arch. And so Marsh's dad was a farmer, dairyman in Iowa, went into World War II, was in the Army, and he was part of the Battle of the Bulge and wound up with a Bronze Star, came back, and he was married at the time with Marsh's mom during World War II, and then he was able to reestablish home in Iowa, but wasn't going to make it because the technology changes. So he got a call to come to Battle Creek, and he was entrusted as the coordinator for the Midwest region for civil defense. It's like the current FEMA, but he was the lead for the Midwest region in his lifetime too.
So what was the connection there? How was he able? How would he get that? How was he able to get that call to go from a farm in Iowa to doing that?
Well, through the Army experiences.
Okay.
And someone knew of his experiences in the Army and said, "We need you here, and we need your leadership."
Mm-hmm.
So that happens sometimes, just to get the right person at the right time, and Marsh's dad was that right person.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of the other part of the family story as well.
All right. Now, if you look back, and in a way you've been talking about this the whole time, if you look back at your time spent in the Coast Guard, how do you think that affected you or shaped you?
Oh,
or what?
It is who I am. I learned about what it meant to serve, what it meant to be a steward, what it meant to be a leader with integrity. And when I was teaching, and still do, those are my watchwords, and they come from my experiences within the Coast Guard. First and foremost, you have to understand the notion of servant leadership. It's something that goes back to Greenleaf and comes full circle. You go on any type of LinkedIn today, and you'll see stories about servant leadership. And it's pretty remarkable that through tens, decades now of understanding leadership, it comes back to that. And I think I saw that in my dad, my father-in-law, and others along the way who were mentors, that servant leadership is an important component. Then something I really believe in my heart of hearts, and that is to be a good steward. Maybe it's through the opportunity I had with serving the Coast Guard in the hazmat area. You have to be good stewards of our land and sea, and you have to be good stewards of the people that we have responsibility for their safety as well. So that's one of my watchwords, as being a good steward. And then integrity. I had a really good mentor along the way. His name was Jim Lloyd. He turned out to be, first off, Jim was an instructor at the Coast Guard Academy. He was also my basketball coach when I was a freshman at the academy. He wound up having an exemplary career. He became the 4-star Commandant of the Coast Guard. He became the first director of TSA. He became the deputy to Tom Ridge in the Department of Homeland Security, and then was the acting department. He, along with my mom and dad, are the only 3 people who call me Tommy. When I was playing basketball, I was Tommy. And so even till today, Jim Lloyd would see me at the Grand Haven event, for instance, and always reference Tommy along the way. So so those are he learned. I learned from him in terms of integrity, how important that is for trust in people, and his notion of integrity was simply put, trust in my word. And so those are the foundations that I got from the Coast Guard, and continued on, whether it be service within the Coast Guard, service within higher education, service in the community. I have served on many boards along the way, all with that notion of being a good steward and being a servant leader.
All right. Well, the whole thing makes for a very fine story, and an unusual one in many ways. So thank you very much for taking the time for sharing it today.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that, sir.